Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of ClueCon Weekly. I am your host, Jon Gray, and today we're going to be talking about mobile IoT with .NET MAUI. And today I am honored to introduce Jared Rhodes, who's the Principal and Technology Consultant at EPAM Systems. Welcome to the podcast, Jared.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So for folks just meeting you, can you give us a little background and sense of your journey so far in the tech world and how you got into mobile and IoT stuff?
Sure. I started my career around 2009, which was a great time to start a career, kind of going through a similar economic cycle right now. I went to an engineering school that was focused primarily on, mechanical, electrical, and my actual degree was in physics. So a lot of my early work with technology was with the physical part of it. So once my
Hmm.
career started, obviously I took the route of having to make websites and back-end services that everyone gets started with, but very quickly Xamarin was introduced, and then I was already working on IoT, breadboard style stuff. Arduino and Raspberry Pi were getting
Yeah.
big, so all those things came together, and I started really working on those. And I've been a Microsoft MVP for IoT for, I don't know, nine years now. So
Nice.
that's been my journey.
Yeah, I like hobbyisting with those Arduino and Raspberry Pis, all the like. So we'll stick a needle in that one because I want to talk about that later. But why choose .NET MAUI? I know you were mentioning that you had some experience in that and kind of getting into the world of Microsoft. What are kind of some tools or ways that they are able to influence the way that you work?
You know, it again, talking about the career path, I use .NET MAUI now because I
Yeah,
used Xamarin back when it was Xamarin. So that was the switch
exactly.
from Xamarin to MAUI. And the reason I chose that was because at the time I knew .NET and I worked with a Microsoft partner, and that was just how I was going to do mobile. And now, if I were to have to pick, people are like, "What do you think? Do you want to use, Flutter, or do you want to use React, or do you want to build it in Unreal Engine?" And for me, I don't want to have to do all those other things because really I already know how to do it one way and I can do it
Yeah.
effectively. So I stick with .NET MAUI. It allows you to build the cross-platform, so that you don't have to write the code for Android or iOS or some other support, technically Windows and some other Mac, other supported platforms. So that I can go ahead if I'm using things like Bluetooth, which all of the modern tablets and laptops usually have built in. I can just do that. I don't have to go ahead and write 4 different applications.
Hmm. Yeah, so you mentioned a little bit of the different environments you could use. What are your pros, cons, or kind of hot takes on .NET MAUI versus Flutter or React Native for kind of the audience? Like, where do they kind of stand in your rankings?
I don't know. For me, obviously,
Hmm.
.NET MAUI is at the top just because I use it. I know the people in the community, and I know exactly how to find the resources. I literally know the touch points back at Microsoft to shake if I really have
Yeah,
a problem. So
there you
that's
go.
my
That
number
always helps.
one.
Hmm. That
Yeah,
always helps a lot when you know who to get in contact with.
right. That's my number one. I see a lot in community and a lot of successful apps deployed using React, and I think it's probably in the number two, just out of the sheer. And we'll talk about, like the ability to write the code. I'm sure the LLMs have seen enough React code that they also can write pretty good, for at least write
Hmm.
the React code. So if you have to get over a hurdle, that's there. Flutter, and it's been 10 years now. I've been doing talks about mobile, and I've always said like, oh, I don't trust Flutter, and I never trusted it because Reddit and Dart, and it's Google supported, and Google
Yeah.
had a habit of, a few years into something, maybe they drop support, and so I never trusted it. Now 10 years, I can't really say that because they're still supporting it. It's 10 years in, people are still writing apps in it, so it must be good, right? It must have some
Hmm.
sort of backing. And then finally, there are a number of people I've met that actually write their mobile apps using the game engines. They use Unity, they use Godot, they use Unreal Engine or another flavor of a game engine. And when someone first told that to me, I was like, okay, why? And they're like, it's easy. It gives me, like, I'm only worried about the UI, and then there it is. I can make the fanciest UI possible, and I'm a
Hmm.
game developer. I've worked in 3D modeling, so I can just make something awesome quick.
No, that's really neat. It is interesting. Flutter just kind of came out of nowhere, quite a Cinderella story, but it is interesting that they've stuck around as you were kind of mentioning. But with Bluetooth and kind of NFC stuff, I'm really interested in that side of development. What are like some real world use cases that you've been able to build, and maybe it started as like a small prototype that you were tinkering with, but then you've actually been able to see it implemented out there?
Well, obviously, the biggest use case for NFC is still payment, right?
Hmm.
Once Apple got Apple Pay and everybody was using it, they eventually, and the reason NFC isn't everywhere is because Apple locked down the NFC SDK for the longest time. You couldn't access it as a developer without some hacks that would make your app break every time they did an
Yeah.
update. So for NFC, I'd still say it's payment, but any contact, I like NFC the most for connectivity. And by connectivity, I mean there's something I have physical access to, and I need to do some sort of key exchange so that I can get onboarded, right? So let's say I want
Hmm.
to connect, like if I have a device that I need to join the Wi-Fi, and I can tap the router and it can hand me the credentials to join the Wi-Fi. It's just such a smooth experience. But any
Exactly.
information where you have physical contact, NFC works very, very well. Um, for Bluetooth, I guess the most successful real world implementation has been working with a company that provides retail, I'll just say retail systems to be general.
Yeah. Don't break NDAs, but cool. Cool. Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, systems in retail. And so the what we were working on with them at the time was they wanted to have the full in-store edge experience built in. So they had cameras, they had an Android-based scanner, so like a barcode scanner. They had an Android app and an iOS app. The Bluetooth, whenever you started your journey, actually tracked you via beacons throughout the store, so that as you went around, like they could both see where you were, they could see what you were looking at on the aisle, so they could say, okay, they or what you picked up, what you put back. They could track you physically through your journey to make sure that whatever they had coming into the camera feed could be mapped back to the actual what you checked out with, so they could do some data validation at the end of the journey. And that gave them all kinds of analytics on how to set up the store, what people want to buy, what people don't want to buy, what people think about,
Hmm.
those kind of things.
Neat. Yeah, that is pretty cool. On kind of using my personal experience on like a smaller level, when connecting things with Arduinos or boards, I often find myself saying, "Oh my gosh, is this a code problem? Is this a hardware problem?" And I'm only dealing with like this small little portion. What does that kind of look like on a macro level? And like, how do troubleshooting things go down the whole? I'm just thinking how that compares to code. Just dealing strictly with code. Does the opportunity of problems occurring, and how do troubleshooting kind of steps navigate when you're bridging those two realms together?
It's really interesting actually. The debugging with the hardware is where I see a giant gap in the current automated SDLC as well. So
Hmm.
talking about being able to debug the hardware, because I can't as easily emulate these hardware physical interactions. I don't have the
Yeah.
capability like I do in, like, let's say a web development workflow where I can just run my unit test, maybe run some integration tests, and then the agent
Hmm.
can work through and figure out exactly what I'm trying to build and correct itself. With hardware,
Yeah.
you don't really have that. So if I'm using, let's say, Bluetooth as a portion of my build, and even if I'm using it for debugging other hardware, right? There's
Hmm.
no automated connectivity there for me to see. What connecting with Bluetooth does allow, though, is as you are doing development. So we did some low rod development, which is long range WAN development many years
Yeah.
ago. And Bluetooth was one of our debugging capabilities because there was no Wi-Fi capability. And the Bluetooth was there so that we could connect to each individual device and read what was going on debug log wise. Because, I mean, if you're testing a wireless signal and that wireless signal isn't working, well, then you have to have something else to read from that system, right?
Exactly. No, that's definitely on a whole nother level. Having unit tests is a lifesaver. So do you think that AI maybe has an opportunity there in some way, or where do you think that AI has kind of influenced this realm of tech?
I don't know if it's going to influence. So the what I do with mobile a lot is about different, like the different user interface patterns. And I don't
Yeah.
know, we're adding in AI to those user interface patterns isn't net new now, right? We went through the first wave of this in about 2017, where we had the
Hmm.
local vision models, we had local models that ran, we had this whole edge based run it on your device model. I don't know if the current wave of AI is going to do anything from the aspect of how we utilize those on the phone. I think if Apple and Meta's bets on the headsets pay off, if they can get the glasses
Hmm.
working appropriately,
Yeah,
well, that's just the
exactly.
next phase, right? All of a sudden now the phone is almost gone. At least that's their expectation because the glass takes over. I can do all my communicating through here. It's already got the heads up display. Everything's golden. So I don't see
Hmm.
AI really affecting how we use the communication protocols now. But when we get to the new form factor, there's probably tons, especially, I mean, obviously it being purely an accessory on top of my vision, interacting
Yeah.
with different user interfaces that I'm going to be using, tons of AI needs to be there, right? The generative AI for things like during conversation, knowing who I'm talking to. I mean, just one that I already do now when I fly, right? I sit down the Delta app to log in, I scan a QR code, and the magic happens behind the scenes so that the heads up display I'm looking at logs me in, right? And you
Hmm.
can imagine that with glasses. I could literally look somewhere, and now it on the other side goes through a process and it knows that I'm me, and we start that. You could supplement that with the communication protocols, Bluetooth, whatever else, because we're already using Bluetooth for key exchanges to make sure that you're physically co-located with what you're communicating with, NFC as well, right? So
Yeah.
there's tons of opportunities that I don't think the AI will directly change until the form factor also gets to the next step. And then there's the other side of how the AI affects it, because AI really affects things in two ways now. It's either in your app or how we build our apps. And I think as far as mobile goes, there is a missing step in the hardware emulation for testing these communication protocols. Everything from the vision for scanning the QR codes, or the 3D modeling that you can do when you're doing the heads up display,
Hmm.
anything with the different communications, NFC, Bluetooth, the magnometer, like everything that you want to communicate with has a gap that the AI agents can't use that I spoke to earlier. So I think there's an opportunity there. Once
Hmm.
that gap is fixed too, now you're going to see more both mobile and hardware development automated.
No, that's really exciting. That's a whole nother plane of just connectivity. We think of just regular UIs, but now we think of using our hands as our own interface or just the world of opportunity there. How much creativity do you think is going to be allowed in kind of those spaces, or do we kind of see that now? But by that I mean, are there going to be a lot of players in this game of using the glasses, I guess, for example, and influencing applications? Or how do we kind of stay on top of that?
I think you'll see a lot of creativity, and I think you'll see a lot of players enter that. If you remember the first mobile surge of I have to have an app, that was
Hmm.
boom times, man. Take this a different place. I mean, that bought my house, that bought my car, because everybody knew they had to have an app all of a sudden. And
Yeah.
if the glasses start to take hold, like the phone did, obviously everyone's going to have an app. So once everyone has to have their app, well, then that takes you to the next level of, well, anything I can do to reduce the cost of you having to have your app, I can be a player. What'll be interesting is to see what kind of hardware they can make fit in that form factor. I think that's one of the reasons that Zuckerberg has spent so much money on these AI
Yeah.
personalities, is because he has to get a smaller form factor to host the stronger models. He won't be able to have the same. Obviously, you can't carry around the NVIDIA GPUs on your headset, so you're going to
Hmm.
have something smaller, and he's going to have to be able to run smaller models that are as effective to the use case on those. The same thing for Apple once they get it in gear. They're different approaches. I believe one software side and the other one's very much on the hardware side, but they're going to work on getting their customized hardware to have the better onboard neural processors so that they can run existing models in the smaller form factor. But once
Hmm.
we get both of those together, whichever way wins, well, then you definitely have everybody on board. Just how we're talking about .NET MAUI. Well, .NET MAUI came about because we wanted to take the existing developer base of the .NET developers, the WPF developers, and move them into being able to make mobile development work. And then once we had that, we had vendors come in on top of that and give you custom control libraries and everything else. So you'll see tons of people in that space because if everybody has to have an app, then there's a marketplace.
No, I agree. I see that completely. So, in making that world kind of possible, where are we now? And kind of if people want to get their hands dirty and kind of play with things like this, how do you recommend, getting in touch with like applications where the physical meets the digital, and how do hobbyists kind of get more involved in touching these technologies that are about to be rolled out and kind of in the future?
About the one in the future. I'll start with the first part about now, and then
Mm-hmm.
we'll talk about future, which I'm still looking at myself. So for
Sweet.
the now, yeah, I don't know. You can get an old Raspberry Pi and get it set up for about $30. You can run a Python app that you get offline for a few bucks, or for free. You get the Python app, and maybe some wires and peripherals for a few bucks,
Mm-hmm.
and then you can use your existing phone, or you can get an older phone because I mean, Bluetooth's been enabled since like 2012, so you should have ability to get an older phone that will connect.
Yeah.
So either one of those, you're probably running less than $50 to $100 on your total investment to get started and play around with things. There's a bunch of different stuff on YouTube that you can watch too for free. There's one guy out there that Girling guy. He even goes out and he gets his NVIDIA cards on his Raspberry Pi. So you could do something very interesting since the Raspberry Pi has Bluetooth built in. You could do a whole different communication protocol to try to talk to your GPU, see where you can go with it. But at the very basics, they have kits they just sell at Micro Center or whatever is local to you, where you can just buy it, put it together, and start testing these things. So that's what I would do to get started. But I'll give a little bit of a warning. The market for that, like obviously Gen AI right now, there's a huge market. The market for hardware
Mm-hmm.
with mobile is much, much smaller, much more niche right now. And so if you're looking to the future, which if the glasses do take hold or the headsets do take hold, it'd be a great investment to already be ready for that market. But it's also a bit of a
Yeah.
gamble. I mean, the original Pro headsets from Apple, there's like $3,000. I was looking at those
Yeah.
going, well, they're Apple, but $3,000 is a lot. Now they've already discontinued it. I'm glad it didn't go. And now Meta, they did their keynote with the glasses, and they had some
Mm-hmm.
issues during their keynote. So it's a bit of an early investment. If it works, then it's you guys know tech. If you're in early and you're right, well then great,
Yeah.
it worked out just fine. I don't know exactly how to get started with the headsets. The way we were doing it back when the HoloLens was out, and a few of the other providers like Magic Leap, like there were these companies that were building these, and you could usually get started in Unity. You could get started in most mobile development providers as well. I know .NET MAUI, you could do some things, but you had to really know what you were doing, and I'm assuming something in React
Mm-hmm.
and Flutter would be available as well. But I don't know exactly about getting started with what's coming and what the entry point should be and how to get it connected to the hardware. That's still the future to me as well.
I'm with you. That's why I was hoping you had some good tidbits on the last part. But what's interesting, I like connecting to just the browser from my VR headset, and then I can mess with web apps, and that's my little like mini hack around where I'm like, all right, I'm still working on it.
Mhm.
You can actually access this video conferencing platform through WebRTC on one of those, so it's been pretty interesting. I can at least do a little bit of tinkering on that level. But with the Arduino stuff, you should definitely check out our conference, ClueCon. We have a maker challenge where we actually mess with Arduinos, have little challenges like that. So, things like making an accelerometer, making a weather bot, weather station like that. You get to see everyone kind of mess around. We did cars that were like self-driving. So I'd like to see you just come in and totally destroy all the rest of us with whatever it is that you drop. But Jared, is there anything else that you'd like to plug or anything else that I've yet to ask you about?
Not that I can think of. I do have a few things coming up. So I'll be at Tech Bash. I'll actually be talking about .NET MAUI and Mobile IoT there as well. And I'll be talking about uh, the Azure IoT offerings. And then right after that, I'm going to be at Ignite, where the company I work for, EPAM Systems, should have a nice big announcement with Microsoft. And I'll be giving a panel there about community building. So talking about running user groups and how to get people involved.
Very cool. Community is a big part of what we do, so I'm glad that you're also spreading the word about it. Jared, thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate the conversation. This has been exciting.
Thank you for having me.